Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're looking at those fictional female characters who always seem to get called crazy.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the ones who keep us glued to the screen, but also make us wonder about those women who don't exactly fit into society's expectations. But don't worry, we're not here to endorse those harmful stereotypes. Instead, we're going to unpack why. These characters are seen as crazy based on what they actually do in their stories.
Okay.
So you've got 10 fictional women from all kinds of genres, comics, movies, books, the whole shebang. See if you can guess who's on the list as we go along.
Okay.
First up, a character who's pretty much the queen of the psycho girlfriend trope, Harley Quinn from DC Comics.
Oh, yeah.
She starts out as a psychiatrist, but then becomes the Joker's, chaotic partner in crime. Harley's known for her unpredictable violence, usually aimed at anyone who messes with her pudding.
Right, but she's also a victim of the Joker's abuse, right? So it's like this interesting mix of victim and perpetrator. Like, she's obviously under his control, and she suffers because of him. But she also goes along with his crazy schemes. It makes you wonder, is she actually bad or just messed up because of what she's been through?
That's a good question. I mean, isn't there some danger in showing a victim of abuse as a violent criminal?
Oh, for sure.
Could it make people think that women who've been abused shouldn't be held responsible for their actions?
It's definitely something to think about. Does it challenge or reinforce that idea that women can't escape their past?
Right.
Especially when it's filled with abuse. It's a tough one.
All right, next up, we've got a character who makes crazy seem, almost planned out. Amy Dunn from Gone Girl.
Oh, wow.
Anyone who's read the book or seen the movie knows Amy is a master manipulator.
For sure.
She creates this elaborate plan to frame her husband for her own disappearance.
Yeah.
I mean, she even fakes her own death.
It's not like she's driven by some sudden burst of anger or passion or anything. What's so creepy about Amy is her cold, calculated cruelty. It's the kind of crazy that makes you wonder if you can ever really know someone.
I know, right? It makes me think about how her character plays on those deep fears we have about people maybe having hidden motives. Like, could someone we think is totally normal actually be hiding something dark? That's a scary thought.
And it plays into those anxieties we have about women and deception. That whole femme fatale thing, you know?
Yeah.
Using her smarts and cunning
to
do terrible things.
Okay, now for a character who seems to actually enjoy being crazy. Bellatrix Lestrange from Harry Potter.
Oh, she's a classic.
She's Voldemort's most loyal follower and just revels in violence and cruelty.
She really fits that madwoman archetype, doesn't she? The one whose actions just seem to come from pure insanity, a love of chaos.
Yeah.
She's unpredictable, shows no remorse, which makes her really unsettling.
All right, buckle up because things are about to get even more intense as we head into the world of anime with Yuno Gasai from Future Diary.
Intense is right.
We're talking serious stalker vibes here.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't mean just checking your ex's Instagram every 5 minutes.
Right.
Yuno takes it to a whole new level.
So Yuno is a perfect example of a yandere, right? It's this anime archetype where a character is totally in love but shows it in all the wrong ways.
Yeah.
Like possessiveness, control, and often violence.
Yeah, she will literally kill anyone she thinks is a threat to her relationship. It's pretty wild.
It's interesting, though, because her violence comes from this twisted sense of love and devotion.
Right.
Like, she thinks she's protecting the person she loves by eliminating anyone who might get in the way.
It makes you wonder about how we show unhealthy attachment and possessiveness in these stories. Is it romanticizing dangerous behavior, or is it a warning? That line can be pretty blurry sometimes.
I agree.
Okay, back to the movies. We've got a character who basically defines the whole crazy ex-girlfriend trope. Alex Forrest from Fatal Attraction.
Oh, yeah, she's a classic.
One night stand turns into a total nightmare for the guy when Alex becomes obsessed with him. Stalking, threats, and eventually violence.
Alex is interesting because she embodies this fear of female anger and vengeance. The movie paints her as someone who's been wronged, right?
Yeah.
And she wants revenge in a way that's both terrifying and sadly often used to dismiss women's real complaints.
That's true. She does fit that stereotype of the woman scorned, becoming dangerous and unhinged. But it's also important to remember that her actions are triggered by the guy's betrayal and his refusal to take responsibility for the affair. Makes you wonder if things would have gone differently if he had just been honest.
It's a good point. While the movie does play into those harmful stereotypes,
Yeah.
it also gives us a peek into the power dynamics between men and women.
Yeah.
And the potential fallout when there's infidelity and dishonesty in a relationship.
Absolutely.
Have you ever experienced something like that where someone's reaction, maybe even your own, seemed totally over the top? What do you think was really going on underneath?
Let's talk about another character who takes obsession way too far.
Okay.
Annie Wilkes from Misery.
Oh, she's intense.
She's a novelist's worst nightmare. Annie is not your average fan.
So how does her craziness manifest?
Well, her mood swings are unpredictable. She's possessive over her favorite author, and she'll use violence to keep him under her control. She's a fascinating study in how fandom can turn into dangerous obsession.
For sure.
What I find really disturbing about Annie is how she uses manipulation and emotional abuse to control her captive.
Yeah.
She's not just physically threatening, she's messing with his mind, which makes her even scarier.
Annie's character sheds light on the darker side of parasocial relationships. These are those relationships where fans get unhealthily attached to celebrities or fictional characters.
Oh, right.
To the point where it's hard for them to separate fantasy from reality.
All right, let's shift gears back to a world of fantasy and political intrigue with Cersei Lannister from Game of Thrones.
Wow, Cersei, she's a complex one.
She's ambitious, power-hungry, and totally devoted to her children. But she's also known for being ruthless and doing whatever it takes to get what she wants.
People often say Cersei's craziness comes from her narcissism, her inability to see things from anyone else's perspective.
Yeah.
Especially if they're in her way. She's a master manipulator and strategist, but her emotional instability makes her dangerous.
She definitely has a flair for the dramatic, which just adds to her crazy persona. Who could forget that walk of shame?
Oh, man.
Brutal. Do you think Cersei was just being cruel, or was there something more going on there?
It's a great example of how, while her actions were definitely meant to be cruel, they also served to humiliate and break her spirit. It really highlights the brutal reality of the patriarchal world she lives in.
Now let's talk about a character who embodies the scary power of institutions. Nurse Ratched from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh, yeah.
This is crazy disguised as sanity. Nurse Ratched uses her position to manipulate and control the patients in the mental institution.
What's so unsettling about her is that she represents how insidious these power imbalances can be. She uses her authority to force conformity, punishes anyone who disagrees, and basically crushes the spirits of those under her care.
Her craziness is in her rigid adherence to rules and her belief that she knows what's best for everyone, even if it means stripping them of their individuality and freedom.
Nurse Ratchet's character is a chilling reminder of what happens when authority goes unchecked and how those in power can abuse their influence.
Exactly.
She also reinforces that harmful stereotype of the cold, unfeeling female authority figure. Have you ever encountered someone like that? Maybe at school or work? How did it make you feel?
Okay, now we're going to take a little detour into mythology with a character whose craziness comes from a tragic curse. Medusa from Greek mythology.
Oh, Medusa, what a story.
She was once a beautiful woman, but was transformed into this monstrous figure with snakes for hair and a gaze that could turn men to stone.
It's a powerful story about victimhood and how women are often punished for what men do.
Right.
She's a victim of assault.
Yeah.
But she's the one who's demonized.
Yeah.
Turned into a monster.
And her craziness is literally turned into a weapon, making her this figure of fear and disgust.
It makes you think about how female power is often seen as threatening and how women who don't fit in are often pushed aside or demonized.
It's amazing how Medusa's story still resonates today. It's like we're still figuring out how to view female power. Is something to be feared or celebrated?
What are your thoughts?
Finally, we have a character who walks the line between crazy and a vigilante seeking justice. Lisbeth Salander from The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Elizabeth, yeah, she's fascinating.
She's a super smart hacker with a troubled past. She's known for her antisocial behavior and her willingness to use violence to protect herself and others.
People see Lisbeth's craziness as a result of the trauma she's experienced and her fierce independence. She doesn't play by society's rules, but her actions are often driven by a desire for justice.
It's hard to put her in a box. She can be ruthless and unpredictable, but she also has a strong moral compass and deep empathy for those who've been wronged.
So Lisbeth's character makes us rethink our definitions of crazy and recognize how societal structures can push people to the fringes.
So there you have it, 10 fictional women who've all been labeled crazy. But as we've seen, there's way more to these characters than just a simple label.
Each of these women is complex, with their own motivations and challenges to societal norms.
Yeah.
Their stories offer a glimpse into the different ways craziness is portrayed in fiction, and the often problematic stereotypes those portrayals can create. What stands out to you?
It's interesting to think about how, even though these portrayals can be problematic, they can spark important conversations about mental health and societal expectations.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on that?
They provide a unique lens to examine how women's emotions are often seen as something wrong or dismissed.
It's like that idea that a woman expressing anger or being assertive is automatically seen as crazy, while a man doing the same thing is seen as strong or decisive.
It's a classic double standard that women face.
It makes you wonder how these portrayals might affect how we see real-world behavior.
That's a really important question. Do these fictional representations reinforce harmful stereotypes? Or do they give us a space to critique them? It's a tough one.
You know, something I find interesting is how these characters, despite their craziness, often have qualities that are traditionally seen as positive.
I see that too. Many of these women are intelligent, resourceful, determined. They defy expectations.
Like Elizabeth Salander.
Exactly.
She's a brilliant hacker who uses her skills to fight injustice. Or even Harley Quinn, for all her chaos. She's fiercely loyal and protective of the people she cares about.
It's almost like their craziness is a side effect of their strength. It's the way of rebelling against the constraints society puts on them.
That's a thought-provoking idea.
What's fascinating to me is how these portrayals of craziness often intersect with real-world issues and societal anxieties.
Can you explain that a bit more? What do you mean?
Well, think about Alex Forrest from Fatal Attraction. Her character taps into those deep-seated feels about female sexuality and the idea that a woman who feels scorned is a threat.
It's like she represents this primal fear of a woman's rage, a fear that's often used to dismiss women's anger as irrational or hysterical.
Exactly. And that fear can be used to silence women, to invalidate their experiences, and to maintain a power dynamic that favors men.
So by calling a woman crazy, you're basically dismissing her feelings and her perspective.
Yes, and that can have dangerous consequences in the real world, where women's voices are often marginalized or ignored.
It's almost like the crazy label is a way to control women, to keep them in their place.
It's a form of social control that has a long and troubling history.
And it's not just about controlling their behavior. It's also about controlling how they're perceived.
Right. By labeling certain behaviors as crazy, we create a very narrow definition of what's considered normal or acceptable for women.
And anyone who steps outside those boundaries risks being labeled as unstable or irrational.
Exactly.
Makes you wonder if we're ever really free to be ourselves without fear of judgment.
It's a way of policing femininity and enforcing conformity.
This is making me think about how these portrayals might also influence our understanding of mental illness. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a crucial point. The media often sensationalizes or misrepresents mental health issues, which just adds to the stigma and the misunderstanding around them.
For example, some of the characters we've talked about show behaviors that could be seen as symptoms of real mental health conditions. But it's important to remember that these are fictional portrayals, not accurate representations of mental illness.
It's dangerous to equate fictional craziness with real-world mental health challenges. Doing so can perpetuate harmful stereotypes and prevent people from seeking help when they need it.
It's also worth noting that many of these characters' crazy actions come from trauma, abuse, or societal pressures.
Absolutely. Their behavior, while extreme, is often a reaction to their circumstances. It's a reflection of the challenges and injustices they faced, not just a sign of inherent craziness.
So instead of just labeling them as crazy, we need to consider the context of their lives, the experiences that have shaped them.
Exactly. We need to move beyond those simple labels and work towards a more nuanced understanding of human behavior. What are your thoughts on that?
This deep dive is really making me think about the power of storytelling and the responsibility that comes with creating these characters.
It's so important for writers and creators to be mindful of the potential impact of their portrayals, to avoid perpetuating those harmful stereotypes, and to represent mental health issues with sensitivity and accuracy.
And as viewers and readers, we also have a responsibility to think critically about these portrayals, to challenge stereotypes, and to advocate for more nuanced and responsible representations of women in mental health.
It's about moving beyond those simple labels and working towards a more empathetic an informed understanding of human complexity.
So what can we do to challenge these harmful stereotypes and promote better representations of women in media?
Well, one important step is to support creators
Yeah.
who are telling diverse and authentic stories about women. Seek out those films, TV shows, books, and comics that feature complex female characters who defy stereotypes.
And don't be afraid to call out those problematic portrayals when you see them.
Right. Engage in conversations about media representation.
Yeah.
Share your thoughts with friends, family, and online. Use your voice to advocate for more inclusive and responsible storytelling.
We can also support organizations that are working to promote gender equality and challenge harmful stereotypes.
Absolutely. There are so many groups doing incredible work. Get involved, donate, or volunteer your time to support them.
And let's not forget the power of our own personal interaction.
That's key. Challenge sexist language and attitudes when you see them. Speak up for women's rights and amplify women's voices.
It's about creating a culture of respect and equality, both on and off the screen.
It's an ongoing process that requires constant vigilance and a commitment to creating a more just world for everyone.
Well said. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive into the world of crazy female characters, what's one takeaway that you hope our listeners will remember?
I think the most important thing to remember is that crazy is a loaded term, often used to dismiss and devalue women's experiences.
It's a label that can have real-world consequences, perpetuating stereotypes and silencing women.
So let's be mindful of the language we use, challenge those stereotypes, and advocate for better representations of women in media.
And let's remember that behind every fictional crazy girl, there's a complex human story, waiting to be explored with empathy and understanding, and maybe even a bit of ourselves reflected back. We've talked about how crazy is often used to dismiss women who don't fit in. But what if we saw those who defy expectations, who refuse to be silenced, not as crazy, but as revolutionary? Food for thought, dear listener.
It's fascinating how these portrayals, even if they're problematic sometimes, can really make us think about mental health and societal expectations, in a different way.
I totally agree. It's like they're holding up a mirror to how women's emotions are often seen as something wrong or just brushed aside.
Exactly. It really highlights the double standards that women face.
Yeah.
Like when a woman expresses anger or stands up for herself, she's labeled crazy.
Right.
But if a man does the same thing, he's seen as strong or a leader.
Yeah, it's so true. It really makes you wonder how these stories we see in movies and books affect how we view real-life behavior.
Right.
Do you ever, catch yourself judging someone's reaction based on something you saw in a movie?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. It's hard to say for sure, but it definitely makes you think, right, do these fictional characters just reinforce the stereotypes we already have? Or do they help us see them more critically? That's complicated.
Something I've noticed is that even though these crazy characters might do some pretty wild things, they often have qualities that are usually seen as good.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're more than just their craziness.
You're right. Many of these women are smart, resourceful, and they don't give up easily. They don't fit the mold, and they don't apologize for it.
Exactly. Like Lisbeth Salander.
Right.
She's an amazing hacker who uses her skills to fight for what's right. Or take Harley Quinn. She might be chaotic, but she's fiercely loyal and protective of the people she cares about.
It's almost like their craziness comes from their strength. Yeah. Like it's their way of rebelling against the limitations that society tries to put on them. But you're not afraid to break the rules.
It's a really powerful idea to consider these women refuse to be put in a box. Maybe that's what makes them so captivating, even when their actions are extreme.
Maybe it's a reminder that there's often more to the story than we see at first. Like there's a human being behind the label.
Right.
Struggling with their own issues, trying to make sense of the world in their own way.
I like that it's about having empathy and understanding, even when it's hard.
Exactly. So as we continue this deep dive into the world of crazy female characters, what else do you think is important for our listeners to keep in mind?
I think it's crucial for all of us to remember that these are complex, multifaceted individuals.
Yeah.
Not just one-dimensional caricatures of what people think mental instability looks like.
I couldn't agree more. It's about seeing past the label and recognizing the human being underneath. Everyone has a story, and everyone deserves to be treated with respect and understanding, no matter how unconventional their path might be.
We've talked about how crazy is often used to dismiss women who don't conform. It makes me think about all the women throughout history who were labeled as crazy or hysterical, simply because they dared to challenge the status quo, to speak their minds, or to live life on their own terms.
You're raising a really important point. History is filled with examples of women who were silenced, marginalized, or even institutionalized, simply because they didn't fit into society's narrow definition of what a woman should be.
It makes you wonder how many brilliant minds, how many powerful voices have been lost because of these harmful stereotypes.
And how these stereotypes continue to impact women today. It's still a challenge for women to be taken seriously, to have their voices heard, and to be treated as equals.
So what can we do to challenge these narratives, to create a world where women are celebrated for their strength, their individuality, and their contributions to society?
It starts with awareness. Recognizing these stereotypes when we see them. In the media, in our conversations, even in our own thoughts. Once we see them, we can start to dismantle them.
I think it's also important to be mindful of the language we use. Words have power, and the way we talk about women, especially those who defy expectations, can have a real impact on how they are perceived and treated.
Absolutely. Avoiding labels like crazy is a great place to start. It's about finding more nuanced and respectful ways to describe women's behavior and experiences. It's about seeing women as individuals, not just stereotypes.
And what about supporting women who are pushing boundaries, who are breaking down barriers, who are creating new narratives?
That's essential. Supporting female artists, writers, filmmakers, entrepreneurs, activists, and anyone who is challenging the status quo and creating a more equitable and just world.
And it's not just about supporting women in the public eye. It's about supporting the women in our own lives,
right?
Our friends, family members, colleagues, and mentors.
It's about lifting each other up, celebrating each other's accomplishments, and creating a network of support and encouragement. It's about recognizing that we're stronger together.
So as we continue to unpack these complex ideas about women, craziness, and the power of storytelling, what's one question you'd like our listeners to ponder, something to really make them think?
I'd ask them this. What if instead of viewing crazy as a negative trait, we saw it as a form of rebellion, a refusal to conform to limiting expectations? What if we recognize the strength and resilience it takes to challenge the status quo? To stand up for yourself, to be unapologetically you, even when the world tells you you're wrong? What if crazy was just another word for extraordinary?
That's a powerful way to reframe the conversation. It's about reclaiming the narrative, redefining what it means to be a woman, and celebrating the diversity of human experience. You know, it's really quite amazing how these fictional characters, even with all their flaws and complexities, can make us see the world around us differently.
I agree.
They challenge those ideas we have about what's normal and what's not.
Yeah, they remind us that there's often more to the story than we might think at first.
Right.
The people we label as crazy or different might be the ones who are actually brave enough to challenge the way things are, to live authentically, and to fight for what they believe in.
It makes you think, maybe it's time we stopped trying to fit everyone into these neat little boxes and started appreciating the fact that people are different.
I think so too.
What do you think? Are we ready to embrace the crazy ones? The misfits, the rebels, the ones who just dare to be different?
I think we have to be. The world needs their creativity, their passion, their unique way of seeing things. They're the ones who will push us forward, challenge our thinking, and inspire us to create a better world for everyone.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of crazy female characters, what's the one thing you really hope our listeners will take away from this conversation?
I hope they'll remember that crazy is just a label, a way to control and silence people who don't fit in. It's a word that's been used to dismiss women, to invalidate their experiences, and to prevent them from reaching their full potential.
You're right. It's time to reclaim that word, to redefine it, to turn it into something positive, a symbol of strength, resilience, and the courage to be yourself, no matter what anyone else says.
So the next time you hear someone call a woman crazy, challenge that assumption. Ask yourself, what's the real story here? Who benefits from this label? And what would happen if we celebrated her strength instead of fearing it?
That's a great point to end on. Thank you for joining us. It's been amazing exploring these characters and the bigger issues they represent.
It's been a pleasure. And remember, listeners, keep questioning, keep challenging, and keep embracing the crazy in yourselves and in the world around you.
That's all for this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those brains buzzing.